Hello, everyone. I've got a little Microsoft Bob going on behind me. You can see it's got a little internet connection back there. Look at that. They got on the internet. If you don't know what Microsoft Bob is, you can look that up on the internet. You'll see some videos on it. Not plenty of videos, but some. Good old Microsoft Bob. No, that's not the dog's name. The dog's name is Roman. Anyway, let's take a look at some internet service provider types. The first thing we want to take a look at here is the term uplink and downlink. In network communications, you've got those two lines of traffic. You've got the data coming in and the data going out. Well, the data going out in this instance is uplink. In other words, I am sending data up. I'm requesting data and I'm sending it up to the server and bringing it down. That's also sometimes called upload and download, or a lot of times it's called upload and download. As a matter of fact, uplink is not usually what I see it listed as. I usually see it as upload and download, but it's the same thing. So if you upload something, you are sending it up to some server website out there. And if you're downloading, you're bringing information down into your computer. Later on in networking, we'll call this ingress and egress. But anyway, let's get into dial-up here. Dial-up, that was the early days of the internet. You already had a worldwide network and it was called the telephone system. So why not use it to send data? Of course, the problem is it was really, really slow. And why it was slow is that when you look at a transmission medium, a way to get your data in and out like Wi-Fi, in this particular instance, you're dealing with cable, two little tiny lines, and two other little tiny lines. So you got a total of 4 lines that you can use, and they're really small and thin, and they're draped across the phone lines throughout the cities. And so you get a lot of loss on those little tiny lines. And so as you're sending that signal, it really cannot go very fast. Some people still have to use dial-up because of price. It's very cheap to do that. But we usually no longer use it, and you can still buy modems, but they're harder and harder to get your hands on. Now, a step up from that is the digital subscriber line. So basically what we're dealing with there is saying, well, let's continue to use these phone lines, but let's change how we're modulating, demodulating. Let's change how we actually are sending that data. And so you're using, again, the same phone lines, but you can get up to 24 megabits per second, and uploads are around 1.4. Now that's relatively slow. And again, the problem is you're dealing with these super tiny little phone lines, and some of them aren't so great. And DSL then becomes very expensive because you have to be close enough to the switching office, the telephone switching office, to actually get the signal. It causes trouble. Cable companies, as the internet grew, were actually really set up well to deliver internet because they used a cable that basically has a solid copper core and can be pushed further. And also the cable was also a lot newer. When you go back to this DSL and dial-up, you're dealing with cable that may have been hung on the telephone poles back in the 70s or maybe as far back as the 50s. That's not really that great. This cable was run for cable access for TV, and that was much later, starting in the 80s. So they use a coaxial cable. And lots of times they use a fiber optic cable to take it to the neighborhood and then coaxial from there. And so they're really, really set up to be able to just, here's your internet, right? And so you do end up with a data over cable services, and they call this a modem because of what it does, not so much the modulation, demodulation. And that has a specification called DOCSIS. And we are up to 3 and 3.1 is what most are dealing with. And so sometimes if you were on cable systems and they say, oh, you need a new modem because we're moving away from this version or that version. But 3.0 supports up to 1.2 gigabits, and 3.1 can support 10 gigabits of download speed. And so that's really, really fast through this cabled network that's there. Now, another way is fiber optics, and many towns and cities are are doing fiber optics. Right outside my house is fiber optics, and that's how I'm connected to the internet, is through fiber optics. And yes, fiber optics technically, scientifically, is the fastest, meaning that it can deliver the highest transfer rates possible. However, that doesn't mean it is the fastest. It depends on your service provider and what they're offering you. Remember, this is copper here, and we can go 1.2 gigabits and that download, and most people aren't even touching that yet. Someday. So anyway, different fiber optics abilities, but definitely overall the fastest. Now, satellite is actually a very good option. Many people around here are starting to switch from this Wi-Fi to cellular, which will be a ripoff for them. And the smart ones are going to satellite. Now, what am I really meaning? So let's jump down to, what do you mean Wi-Fi? Well, in this particular instance of what they're dealing with here on Wi-Fi, they're really talking about an antenna sitting on your house, shooting over to another antenna that's way out there someplace. And that's wireless networking. That is wireless networking. So they're not really talking about having Wi-Fi blanketed just like it is in an office building or such. Although some cities, because they are condensed, are doing that. They're actually putting up antennas on the poles, and there's Wi-Fi covering those areas. In that case, it would be a pretty good connection. But here it really is, and those of you that use it, you're outside of the populated area, so to speak, and you've got this antenna and it's shooting out to some pole that you can barely see, and it's slow. It's really slow. Around here, it's slow. It could be faster if they wanted it to be, or could afford it to be. I don't know what their situation is. And of course, cell phones is basically like saying, hey, cellular is saying, hey, the same thing that your phone is using, we'll just get a little box that'll convert your cell signal into a Wi-Fi signal, and then you'll have that in your house. In hugely populated areas, that won't be too bad, but around here, what I mean is that they'll be sold on that because they'll go to Verizon and they like Verizon or whatever, and they'll say, oh yeah, get this, it'll solve your problems. Get them in a year contract, and then they go, this is no better than the Wi-Fi I had. Yeah, because it depends on how good your cell connection is. If your cell connection is not that good, then you're not going to get any better transmission rates with the little box that's doing the same thing as your phone. This one is currently, when you're out away from things and cannot get cable and cannot get fiber, is normally the best, most solid one. And really what's happening is that you are going to talk to a satellite. So just like Dish does, where it's receiving, you'll actually send information. And that's usually the slowest part. Like the downloads are pretty fast, but sending the information out, there's a latency, there's a lag time. But it's everywhere. It's in Montana, it's in Wyoming. They can get that to happen there. And there's companies that are expanding that and trying to make it so you have super fast internet from satellite, basically wherever you are in the world. But these are the main ways that you can connect to your ISP that's going to allow you to connect to the internet. All right, we're going to take a look at a little bit about cellular technology, which is your cell phones. And I love this picture. There's a cell tower, but it's only part of a cell tower. This is a cell tower that's got all the relays on it. All these different ones are being used to relay to another tower that looks like this. So quite often down below here, you actually have the flat panel or the more flat panel antennas that are providing the cell access. This is not providing the cell access for your vehicle, for you on your phone. This is getting you to the next hop. And so basically why they call this cellular technology is that these towers make up cells. Let me actually pull up what that looks like for you. Flash, there it is. All right, so, slide share, aren't they great? It's not a great picture, but here you go. The idea of the name cell or cellular, it describes the towers and the coverage area that they have. So the idea is to put up towers around so that they are close enough, right? They've got a big gap here, but the gap would hopefully not be there. And then each of those towers is covering the area and allowing access to many devices. And then that's going to enter a mobile switching center. In other words, a large piece of equipment that's going to handle the load of all these phones that are out here. And then it'll go into the public switch telephone network. So it'll go into the regular telco network that's been there forever. And that is why it's termed cellular, because you have these cells that you're going to travel through or be amongst in order to get access to the public switch telephone network. All right, Flash, there's another one for you. Here's what a cell tower looks like. So most towers are going to look something like this, where basically these panels that are sitting upright, those are what's sending out the signal to your cell phone, as you can see on here. They're sending the signal to your cell phone, and then they have basically two options. Quite often you are not going to see, that's one taken from below. Quite often you're not going to see these, right? You just see this. If it's in a city area, you'll often just see the top portion of the panels, and then they'll have a cable running down, and it'll actually take it cabled over to where it needs to go. This situation is a lot more typical as you head out of town. And so you have this tower that's providing access as you drive along I-10 or whatever. And then this is sending the signal down to the next hop, the next tower, the next tower, the next tower, the next tower, until finally it gets into the public switch telephone network where it can be sent out. That's why when you're out there and you're like, okay, dial. No, it's dialing, right? It takes a long time because it's hopping along these towers using wireless, which is not super fast. It's not like fiber optic cable. And then once you get connected, you're talking, but there's always a little tiny bit of lag depending on where you're at. But that's cellular technology and how it works. And basically the G's are just the next generation. That's why you can get away, or they can get away, not you can get away. They can get away with just false advertising, I guess is the way to put it, right? Because 5G on one network is not 5G on another network. It's their fifth generation, which everything goes back to, the first G, but that's not necessarily the same G. That's what I'm saying. So this goes into all the little standards that they want you to know some things about. 4G was in 2009, and here we are in 5G. Can handle about 1 million devices per square kilometer, or 0.4 miles. And this is bringing about the full potential of the Internet of Things, which are devices that can communicate seamlessly with each other in real time. It has nothing to do with cellular technology. Internet of Things we will talk about in another video. But it is kind of important to understand this is a building block of our current internet situation. So much more of what we do on a phone, on a device like this, than on a computer. We do tons of stuff on devices like this instead of a computer. In any case, that's cell technology. Let me know if you got any questions about it. We'll talk with you later.